way back when Lynn Bradshaw and Lucretia Moore, all them folk was, let's see, Betty Grantham. We worked in scouting, and Betty was a Girl Scout leader, and we used to see each other quite a bit. I would come over on the campus, and when Dave Caldwell cooked up there, he saw to it that the students could come to Persimmon Grove anytime we was having anything, no matter what it was.
Now we talking.
See, I'm more trouble than I'm worth.
Can we?
At least some arms is on this chair.
Hold on.
She got slide it over for you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
I don't think this is working yet. Can you hear Theresa?
Yeah.
Oh, I can talk loud. And the children about stopped me from talking. They said, Mama, you talk too much. And so I about stopped talking. But when I have to, I know how to get loud.
Well, we want to thank Theresa for coming. She turns 95 soon, so big shout out for her birthday. And
thank you.
And to Persimmon Grove, which has a long and storied history itself, beginning in 1882, as we said out there along 421. The cemetery is still out there. Dedicated here in 1958, and in 1971, and we're just celebrating the 50th anniversary, New Garden Friends School began in the basement here with Jim Newland and Bruce Stewart, working with the Judd family and folk at Persimmon Grove in starting that interracial school at a time when so many white flight schools were starting in Greensboro. So a wonderful storied history of this community with the Quaker community and Guilford College. And I want to start out by asking Theresa just to share what are your earliest memories of growing up in this community?
Oh boy. Well, I can tell you about me. I would go up on the campus to League of Women Voters with Martha Meredith and Lucretia Moore and let's see, I'm forgetful now. I wasn't forgetful when I was young. God didn't let me be forgetful. And sometimes I remember too much and bring stuff up nobody know what it's talking about.
While Theresa's looking through her minutes, I just want to mention Gertrude Upperman can't be with us. Sadly, her husband Lamont passed away yesterday. And so she called yesterday and said, I wanted to be there. I don't think I can. So be holding her and her family in the light.
Yeah, she called me last night to see if I was going to be here. She know I'm 95 years old. But with the help of that oldest son of mine, God left him here to take care of me when my husband passed away. And we worked together for almost 70 years. He didn't grow up around the Quakers in this community, but he learned to love them just like I did. My mom and daddy both worked for old Franklin and Josephine Davis, Professor Davis. I stood at the foot of his bed, and he taught me my ABCs. He'd tell me to say them from A to Z. And I do what he told me to do. I said my ABCs from A to Z, because Mama done taught me them at home. He said, now say 'em backwards. And I thought, what's he talking about? He said my ABCs backwards. I tried, and he helped me. And after that, he had me hooked. Because when I go with Mama to work, I knew I was going to stand at the foot of his bed, say them ABCs forward, and then I was going to say them backwards. And I learned to say them. When I went to school, I could say ABCs forward. He'd say, now say them backwards, and I say them backwards. So I was ahead in school ever since. Professor Franklin Davis taught at Guilford College, and my dad and Mama both worked in his home. I don't know if he grew up in the Carfax or not, but he always had Daddy drive him up to Carfax. And he and Josephine go up there and get vegetables from them farms up there and come back, and Mama and Josephine would make candy and cook and fix, and Miss Davis always sent us children some. When Mama come home, Miss Davis take this to the children. And I was in New York in the 10th grade. My daddy sent me up there to be with his sister because she was sick. And I went, and she said, you know what, Theresa? You talk just like the Quakers. I thought, well, what does that mean? I talk like the Quakers. And then I said, well, I grew up in a Quaker community. I said, my mom and daddy both worked for Quakers, Professor Davis and Josephine. And I said, I grew up right around the Quakers. And then I told a little bit about my granddaddy, my mama's daddy, walking from Stewart, Virginia to Guilford College. He was a quiet man, but he had heard somebody say, when they freed the slaves, you go to Guilford College around the Quakers, they'll help you. And he walked every step of the way hiding in the woods, because if they'd have caught him, they'd have carried him back to the plantation. But he walked, wasn't no highways and good roads. He walking through the woods and over the little streams and hiding, because they had folk out there looking for the slaves to take them back to the plantation. But he walked right here to Guilford College, and they did help him. They gave him a job. He was worked in the boiler room on the campus of Guilford College. He was working in the boiler room. They gave him a job, and then when Abe Lincoln said, give him 40 acres on a mule, he said that before my granddaddy walked here. That was his reason for walking here. Somebody told him, the Quakers will help you, and he walked every step of the way from Virginia to Guilford College. And sure enough, they gave him a job, and eventually he got his 40 acres. Never saw a mule there. But he had his 40 acres, and evidently there was a mule involved, because I don't know if you know Donald Osborne or not. I don't know if he was a Quaker. But he come to Grandpa and asked for the mule. And Grandpa's oldest son, Bob, was using the mule. But when Donald Osborne came, I think it was in the contract that Grandpa and Donald would share the mule. And when Donald came and wanted the mule, Bob, my Uncle Bob, was using the mule. But Grandpa had him to let Donald have the mule. And it made my mama's brother, Bob, it made Bob mad that he had to let Donald Osborne have the mule. And he got so upset, he left Greensboro and went to New Jersey. And went up there, and when he got 104 years old, up there he was applying for hunting license. And he said he was 104. They didn't believe him. And his daughter sent that story back here to my mama, that they didn't want her daddy to have no license, and they done a search on him and found out he's telling the truth. He was 104. And I can remember him coming here, cutting a watermelon in half like that, and set it down in his lap and take a spoon and eat the whole half of watermelon. But that doesn't apply to today. When my children tell me, Mama, you talk too much. And I just stop talking about me and talk about whatever y'all want to ask me.
Sure. Well, before we open up for some questions, just want to remind you, what do you know about Franklin Davis? This is the quiz.
He lived in the Deep River community.
Yep. And who do you live next door to on Francis King Street?
Oh, there, Woody.
The Woodys. Okay. So, questions. I'm going to ask the first one then.
Now, here go talking about me.
Yep, well,
We bought our little acre we live on now from Woody.
yep,
John W. Woody sold my husband that lot my house is on right now.
yep.
And my husband paid for the lot, and he had wanted to go to Philadelphia, my husband did, because his family was up there. I said, no, can't leave my mama, can't go to Philadelphia. And he said he had such a hard time getting a loan through. He done been overseas to Germany and was a sergeant in the army in World War II. And he got back here and they didn't want to cooperate and let him have nothing. And he just kept trying. He finally asked me, if I pitch a tent up there on that lot, will you stay with me? I said, I sure will. I said, but we're not going to give up trying to get this loan through. I said, you done paid for it. You went overseas, made sergeant over there in Germany. And I said, they going to be worried with us for a long time, because they ain't stopping. And he said, well, if I pitch a tent up there, you going to stay? I said, yeah, I sleep in a tent. And he kept going up there trying to get the loan through. He got discouraged many times and said he wasn't going back. I said, you have to go back. I said, you've been overseas and made sergeant in the army and done your duty, and now you back. I said, you got to keep going. Let them know you're entitled to it. He did. Because every time he said, gonna stop, I said, no, can't stop, have to keep going. And he finally kept going till they decided they would approve our loan and let us build that little house. I still live in it over there.
Well, the question I wanted to ask is, after you learned your ABCs at the foot of the bed at Franklin Davis, where did you go to school? Was it in Woodyside?
Woodyside. Woodyside was right down the street from where my mom and daddy lived. And I went to school right there at Woodyside. Mama could watch us walk from our driveway to the school driveway. And my grandma lived right next door to the school. And
Now, did that go through 8th grade? Was it a high school?
yes, it went through the 8th grade.
Then where did you go?
Well, we were supposed to go to Florence, over near High Point. they sent a bus over here to take us over to Florence. But my daddy said, no, you're not gonna go there. And he went and took me downtown to go to school and to Sedalia. And my daddy's mother and Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown was good friends. So daddy took me to Sedalia to go to school. And I got down there, and she didn't have no room in the dormitory for me to stay. And she took us to 2 homes. She said if I can get her a room with this family, I'll take her in. But if I can't get her a room with this family, I said I'd never forget the families, but I have. Don't remember the names of the folk. She got an old piece of truck daddy was driving and went to these 2 homes, and they had took somebody else, and she couldn't give me a room. But she told my daddy, she said, you take her back up Market Street. There's a little school over on the right as you enter into Market Street. It's called Lutheran. It's a Lutheran school. And you take her over there. She knew my daddy. Dr. Brown knew my daddy well. She said, Norman, don't go home. Take her straight over there to that school, because I'm going to call up there and tell her that you're coming. And sure enough, when I got over to the school, Dr. Now came down the steps and introduced himself, Dr. Henry Now. He said, you're Norman. My daddy said, yes, I'm Norman Chavers. She said, well, Dr. Brown has already called and said you was coming, and we can take her in, and we will take her in. I didn't like it, but had to do what my daddy said do. That was understood. So I didn't say a word. He took me into school there. I was supposed to stay on the campus, and I did. I didn't like that a bit. But my daddy put me on the campus. $20-some a month, stay in the dormitory. I paid it myself. Daddy making $8 a week at Terracotta. That was his week's salary. And so I said, all right, I'll go, Daddy. I'll go. He said, yes, you going right over there on the campus and stay over there and go to school. Well, that was in the 9th grade. And then my daddy's sister got sick in New York, and my daddy wanted me to go to New York and stay with his sister. I don't suppose none of y'all know her, 'cause she and her brother, my daddy wouldn't go to school. Grandma said daddy wouldn't go to school. He quit school in the 5th grade. And I always thought after I got up and learned, Mama taught us so much, and different people, Dr. Franklin Davis, and everybody was so good about teaching us. I thought I could help my daddy by telling him things. He didn't know. He didn't appreciate that a bit. He didn't appreciate it. He just got worse, that I do what he said do. And if you knew my daddy, you obeyed him. If you stayed under his roof, you done what he said do. And so I said, all right, I'll go to Lutheran. And I did. I graduated 1945 from Lutheran. But he pulled me out to go to New York and stay with his sister, 'cause she was sick. And her husband worked on the train traveling. So I went, didn't like it one single bit. I said, where's the backyard? Wasn't no backyard. Where's the clothesline? Wasn't no clothesline. You put your clothes on a little string and roll it out, and it went across the alley to the other apartments over there, and that's where they dried the clothes. Oh, Lord, I hated that, because I was used to a clothesline in the backyard. But I had to put up with it. I had no choice. And I stayed. Well, then when I went to New York, my daddy's sister was well known. She had a Bennett College education. She and her brother had been at Bennett College. But my grandma said my daddy wouldn't go to no school at all. He wouldn't even go to Sunday school. So I knew I had to stay. and I stayed. And one of her friends got me a little job babysitting, picked the little girl up, and we walked to her apartment. And the little girl's mama told me, she said, Theresa, you sound just like the Quakers. And I thought, what's that got to do with it? And I finally told her, I said, I grew up in a Quaker community. I said, a Quaker professor taught me my ABCs before I went to school. I said, Mama worked for him, and she had to take me and my brother with her to work. And I said, why is she there working? Professor Davis taught us our ABCs. We stood at his foot of his bed, and he had us to say our ABCs forward. Then he tells us to say them backwards, and I said, we did. So when we went to school, we knew our ABCs. We knew them better because we could say them backwards.
Did you go on to Dudley after that?
No, went to Woodyside.
Yeah.
I was going to show you a picture of Woodyside School, if I can find it. And this picture, I don't know when it was. I'm not on there because I'm not the age of them folk, but that was, see, Woodyside School. And I don't know if Waldo Woody gave, well, I think on the, what they call that out there side the wall?
The cornerstone? Or?
It's a cornerstone. I think Waldo Woody's name is on there.
Yeah, he gave the plot of land.
Yes, that was the church up on the railroad. But we brought the cornerstone on down here and put it up. And that's Woodyside School. And I don't know when the school folded up. We went, tornado came through here, Hurricane Hazel, tore this school down. And we had to go to Reynolds Chapel Church and Rollins Crossroad Church to school. I'm not on this picture. This is an older picture. My daddy's sister's on here. And my mama's sister's on here. And Professor Earl Sapp, I don't know if a lot of people knew Earl Sapp. He was a teacher, graduated Bennett College. And his picture's on here because he taught the 3rd and 4th grade at Woodyside School. And the place where this school was built is right over there on Hillborough Road now, but it's apartments on that land. Now, I don't know how. It was a recreational center for a while. We used it for recreation, community recreation, but it got away because there's apartments on that land now. over there. I'm not on, this is way before my time. But
Can we pass that around? Would that be okay?
yes, that'll be fine.
Was that SAP, the one that SAP Road off Guilford College, is that same family? SAPP?
Sap Road, just off of.
Yeah. Earl Sapp lived over there. That's run off a window in there. The kids over there came over to Woodyside to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can pass that around. I'm not on that because that's way before my time. But
Are there other questions people have?
What was going on in this area during the sit-ins and civil rights struggles?
well, during the civil rights, I should remember that. I was busy with Women League of Voters up at Guilford College. But I couldn't get anybody else interested from my community, so I went by myself. With Lynn Bradshaw, Martha Meredith, Lucretia Moore.
To answer your question, I grew up in that era. And if you understood this neighborhood, we didn't have those problems. I can truthfully say I graduated from Guilford High School, old Guilford High School. And when they integrated the schools and said we had to go to school, I didn't want to go. My dad said, "Oh yeah, you going?" Because he paid taxes. And I said, "Okay." But when we got over there, it was not like that. That was because we all were taught to say, "Yes, sir," "No, sir," "Yes, ma'am." We had all of those things with us when we went over there to the school. And they reciprocated in the same manner. You could tell that they were brought up. Now there was animosity sometimes, but that came from the older people. The kids that I grew up, I'm 72. And when I grew up in that area, we didn't have those problems. I had friends come, my best friend, Bobby Wood, lived over on Guilford College Road. And he would come over to my mama's house in the morning and eat breakfast with me. You know, it wasn't nothing like what you see. It's where the neighborhood. See, we took the neighbor out of it, and now it's just a hood. But back then, we had a neighborhood. This was a neighborhood. I played from here to Guilford College, swam in the lake. Me and Logie learned how to swim over there in the lake. We didn't have any problems. You know, you didn't hear people. Every now and then you'd hear somebody say something, but you knew that it wasn't nothing. It didn't mean anything. We all shopped at the same Brains Buy Right grocery store. We bought gas at the same gas station. My daddy would come and see Mr. Bonduin. I had to say, Mr. Bonduin. I couldn't call him by his first name. That was a zero. You know, so those are the things that we had to deal with when you say back in those days. Well, that's two different things when you're talking about it. You're talking about what you see on TV and what you saw here. I just wanted you to know that in this neighborhood, we didn't have those problems. They were non-existent.
Yeah, and he mentioned Bobby Wood coming to our house to have breakfast. He would fix Bobby's breakfast, and then they played football at Western Guilford together. And him and Bobby would get out there in the backyard and practice their plays they're gonna do when they go to practice. And they played and played. The coach tell him, "You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job." When he graduated from Western, Bobby got the scholarship, go to East Carolina, didn't he? He was told he had a mama and a daddy working for him, and he didn't need no help, but Bobby needed help. So he didn't get no scholarship. I thought you didn't know those kinds of things were going on unless you had children and you were keeping up in the PTA and going to the football games and going to the football practice and going with them when they went off somewhere else. I followed the bus and go with them. But he didn't get no scholarship. Woody got scholarship to go to college. We paid for him to go to college, A&T, till he quit.
Yeah, Bonnie had a question. Yeah.
Were there other families in your neighborhood who also worked at Guilford College?
Worked at Guilford College. Yes, my mama worked at Mayor Hobbs for a while after Professor Davis died. And Josephine, she moved back to Chester, Pennsylvania. I think that was her home. My mama went up there to see her a couple of times, 2 times. She went to, I had sisters in Reading, Pennsylvania. My mama went to Reading, and my sisters took her mama over to see Josephine Davis at Chester, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, is it right back there?
Yeah, I just want to go back to his comments. While young folk may not see what is happening around them, and Theresa mentioned the fact that the other fellow got the scholarship and he didn't get the scholarship. There was plenty of discrimination in this community. And in the 70s, well, I came to Woodyside a couple of times. One was when the old school was being converted into a recreation center in 1962. A group of us from A&T and UNCG came out to work on the building. So that was my first introduction. Well, my second introduction to this community was when the young ladies at Western Guilford wanted to be cheerleaders and was discriminated against. So there was discrimination in this community. And the other thing is to look at when Guilford College decided to desegregate. Now they had black students from Africa, but they did not take any American blacks. So, you know, things wasn't
Always good.
ice cream, okay? Not in this community.
I don't know if you know, Louis Brandon was one of the sit-ins. He was there the second day of the sit-ins and has been an activist in Greensboro ever since.
Well, yeah, Bill?
You mentioned that you had a hard time getting a loan to build your house. What bank or who eventually gave you the loan?
Home Federal.
Home Federal. Okay. Are they still around in another bank? But Home Federal.
Home Federal. Finally decided. But my husband was going to give up. He wasn't going. I'm not going over there asking for nothing no more. I said, yes, you are. You've been over in Germany. You was a sergeant in the army, and your discharge papers say you were honorably discharged. And I said, we're going to keep right on going until they make some decision that we agree with. And he'd lay off for a day or two, and he'd go back. And they sent him to somebody else to talk to. And he'd go talk to that person. Well, it died down. But when he come home and tell me, I said, well, that's all right. We're going back again. We go right back. He said, no, T, I ain't going back up there and ask him for nothing. He was he'd learned in the Army, making a sergeant in the Army. And when he got ready to be discharged, they knew he was going to be discharged. And they sent him with no help down to Liège, pick up some German prisoners. And he had direction for going to the place, got there and picked up German prisoners. And coming back, the prisoners was on the back of the truck. He stopped at a stoplight. And when he stopped at the stoplight, 2 of the prisoners got off. He said he got up on the truck and he called the names, called the roll of who he's supposed to have on that truck. And when 2 didn't answer, he said them the 2 that got off. They got off and ran. And he got back to the camp and told them what happened, that he stopped at a stoplight. And 2 of the prisoners got off the truck. He said, I got up on the truck and called the roll. And these 2 didn't answer to their name. He said, I decided them the 2 that got off. They didn't answer to their name. They took my husband's sergeant's stripes away from him. Took his sergeant's stripes. So he was discharged a corporal. That was to keep him from getting sergeant's pay. He got corporal pay. And but he was smart man. He worked 2 and 3 jobs, had 2 and 3 jobs all the time to give us a comfortable home and raise our children. He had even up until he drove a bus for Morgan and Son, carried Guilford College football players all the way to Texas.
Wow.
And he's just as smart as they was, because they gave him such a hard time, he didn't want to ask them for nothing. So he had 2 and 3 jobs all the time to get what was comfortable for us. So, and God was with us all the time. That's the one thing. God was on our side. And whatever we tried to do, God would help us and keep us up on our feet and hands to do what we had to do. And that was work for a little pay. When I got married to my husband, his bring home pay was $32 a week.
32 a week.
32 a week.
Wow.
And they finally, the employees called, they had oh Lord, what was it? People refused to work. Strike. Thank you, that's exactly. They had a strike. My husband went and walked picket line, trying to get more. And I think when they got through walking on the picket line at Cone Mill, they finally got $38 a week. Went from $32 a week to $38 a week. And he had to walk picket line during the strike. But God gave us sense enough to use them little $38 wisely. Not want everything, just want what we needed. Little food. Mr. Rainey give us, we had charge account, Mr. Rainey's grocery store. Mr. Rainey himself would deliver the groceries to our house, to the back door. He chose to do that. We didn't ask him to do it. And he got to know us, because when my husband got them little $32 a week, he went right straight and paid the grocery store so we could get some food. So we had to make a living. You had to work somewhere. And my husband worked at Cone Mill. That's where he finally got on a job. And he got him another job, the Plantation Supper Club, and worked out there. He could do anything out there. Fred Curry would have him using the lights and shining the lights on the performers, and working in the kitchen, working on cars, go cat them trays out in the parking lot, and wait on the car. Sometimes richer folk would go out there with their parties, and they would have their liquor, and they give it to him. He put it in the car, and sometimes he'd have to drive them home, and they sent him back in a cab. And my husband would take him home. They call a cab, send him back to Plantation Supper Club. He'd go back out there and work till 1 o'clock. You just have to know how to help yourself and ask God to help you. And tell you there ain't nothing like his help. He'll carry you through things you thought you couldn't do. But I tell you, you stick with him, because I know better. He'll help you through anything you're trying to do. If it's right, if it's wrong, he'll help you anyway and show you that it's wrong.
I know we don't have a lot more time. Gwen, do you have any questions?
Well, I remember Logie telling me stories about when he was a kid coming to Guilford's campus, and I just wondered how much interaction you had with the campus. I know you mentioned the Davises, but when you were growing up, did you explore the campus much, or were you mostly seeing people in their homes?
I didn't work on the campus, but I worked for families that was connected to Guilford College. Dave Meredith and Martha, Lucretia and Floyd Moore, Betty. She married another name. Yes. We was in Girl Scouts together. Went to Girl Scout training, because her girls was Girl Scout. And I was Girl Scout for this community. And we got to be friends. I would go up to Guilford College campus, and I'd always see her, and she came over to my house. Her children could come there and play with my children, just like they lived next door. But
Theresa, was Woodyside then, back when you and or maybe before you and your husband built there, was it an integrated neighborhood or completely black neighborhood? And today, you're still living there? Is that integrated or segregated neighborhood?
It was just black families lived in there.
Still
And
now?
the school was built there, and all the
Black
students
families.
was black families.
Today, has the neighborhood changed and gotten more integrated?
Oh yeah, apartments where that school building said there's apartments there. And when something, Hurricane Hazel came through, we went to school in the church. Way over near 40 was Rawlins Crossroad. Some of the students went there, and a little further this way off of 40, Reynolds Chapel Church was over there, and we went over there to them two churches to school.
Well, how did you meet your northern husband?
How did I?
Meet your husband, who was from the north, you said, I believe.
No, he's from Anson County.
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
Cotton fields.
He
Anson
knows
County.
in Philadelphia.
Yeah, his daddy and some brothers and sisters all in Philadelphia. But
How
I
did
didn't.
you two meet?
Well, I was sitting on my grandma's front porch
Okay.
in a red dress.
Yes.
And he was with some other girls. And they pulled in the driveway. The other girls, I knew them, but they were not, my daddy didn't let me play with them. But they pulled in the driveway and called me and my husband, come out, me and my cousin, come meet some friends of ours. So we got up off the porch and went out to the car to meet these friends. He was in the car. I met him, but no impression. I didn't know the girls that well, but my cousin knew them well. They was her age. She's younger than me. And so I went back up on the porch down at Grandpa's. Sit up there on the porch with Grandpa. And they talked to my cousin Jerry Sapp. And then she came on back up on the porch. But my husband told me, he said he saw me walk out to the car, and he said to himself, I'd like to meet her. I'd like to meet her again. And my daddy would run a little old handy corner. He sold sodas and ice cream and pig feet and bread. He had a piccolo in there. We could put money in the piccolo. And the piccolo was in a spacious place because we could dance. And community kids came to his place to play the music and dance. Well, back then, I could dance. So he kept coming to the shop, to the handy corner. He came in, stood and watched me dance with somebody else. Got him a soda, stood and talked to my daddy. The boys grew up right around here, scared of my daddy. They weren't gonna tackle that. They didn't come to dance with us. And so my husband, when he started coming, he made friends with my daddy first. Yes, he was. And he stayed talking to my daddy, got to know my daddy before he did me. And then finally, he came and he danced with me. And he could waltz, and he could two-step, and he could jitterbug. He'd learned to dance overseas. And I could dance too back then. And when he got a chance to come and ask me to dance, he'd done been talking to my daddy, several weeks and weekends and all. He'd come and he'd talk to my daddy. I'd be out there on the floor dancing with some of the other boys around here in the community. But when he finally asked me to dance, he danced different from the boys around here in the community. And so I thought, he can dance.
Now that little shop, is that right there at the curve? I think we passed by that.
Yes,
Yeah.
right in
Just
the curve of Hibbler.
Right.
And
It's just a platform now, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
Somebody.
Yeah, one last thing, I know we're at noon, so, yeah.
Yeah. In the response to Catherine, a question about the character of the community, people always use this term gentrification. Gentrification is not taking place downtown in Greensboro. This is what gentrification truly what you talk about when you talk about gentrification. You talk about Woodyside, Persimmon Grove, our Persimmon Church Road. That is gentrification. It's not white people moving back downtown in Greensboro. It's white people coming into a community that was historically black and taking over it. Because if you came here in the 50s, you wouldn't see all this around.
I can remember when I was younger, the three churches, when one church was having annual programs that we had, we would close our doors here and go to their church. And Dave Caldwell cooked at Guilford College, but he was a member of this church. And when we had revival meetings, big meetings, sometimes they call them, Mr. Dave Caldwell would invite the students from Guilford College to come down. They'd come to service. They'd come and eat with us, because we'd serve food right here on campus. Back then, it was all church related. Mr. Dave would invite the students to come, and they would come, most of them would come during our revival meeting. Mr. Dave always welcomed students from Guilford College to come to things here at the church.
Thanks. Well, Theresa, thank you so much for sharing. I know we could probably stay here all afternoon. Thank you all for coming for this 3-hour tour, and we're not stuck on Gilligan's Island the rest of the day either. But thanks for participating. Theresa, especially thank you, and thank Persimmon Grove for opening up the church for us. And again, Memorial Day on Monday at 10, we'll have a full cemetery tour if you haven't had enough. So, and again, Theresa, thank you so much.
Cemetery tour.
Right, over at the...
Now, I don't know, the years ago, I learned about New Garden and the play down in Snow Camp, yeah, Snow Camp. I was going down there years and years ago when they first started having that play.
Right. Pathway to Freedom, Sword of Peace.
Yes, Sword of Peace. I've been there to see that, and then I learned how that area was connected to Guilford College, because I can remember right over there on New Garden Road, I can remember this little shack, but it was covered with corn on the outside. And I think Levi Coffin was in charge of slaves coming from the deep south, and they'd come up through here, Guilford County, and they'd go to that little house right over there, right down the road, down not Friendly Road. New Garden Road. And there was this little shack of a house out there, but on the outside it was covered with corn. You'd never think it was a house under there, because there was corn covered it. And slaves would come from deeper south, right over there on New Garden Road, and Levi Coffin would put them, give them food, and give them a place to sleep. Next morning, they had to leave and go further north. And I remember that little shack and covered with corn was still there when I could remember that. And when I went to see Underground Railroad, That's in there.
Wow.
About that underground, that little shack out there, how Levi Coffin would let the slaves stay, spend a night, give them a night's sleep, and then give them food to go on. Now, I just had an article, I don't know if you saw it. And I thought my children is so into the I don't know
Yeah,
if you
there's-
did you see that?
Yeah,
All right.
I was in it.
You
It's the piece about Adrian Israel and me supposedly giving a presentation up at the Levi and Catherine Coffin Museum in Indiana, where we learned about John Henry and Sarah. So sadly, Adrian couldn't go, but yeah, that's the house, and that's the new museum. Thank you.
I didn't know if you saw it or not, but I used to watch the paper for things like this and cut it out. But I don't try to keep it no more. The children not. I used to keep it so I could give it to my children. But they don't be interested.
Well, Theresa, thank you so much. And again, thank you all for coming.
And for those of you who are interested in some of the families that had property in Woodyside early on, we are working on a project right now with the Woody papers that we have at Guilford College and the Quaker Archives to have a better index to those names because John and Mary Woody's papers include a number of deeds relating to this landscape and trying to connect those to some of these stories that you've heard today. So, good job.
Yep.